welcome to Bible Size Chat. Gus, hi.
Hi, why the face?
This is take 3 now on the same video. Gus, my stars. I'm just kidding. It's okay. Gus, you're gonna need to focus. We're talking today about a topic that we've been covering in Care
We're going to
Group.
continue the video.
We're gonna continue the video. I'm not stopping it this time. I refuse.
That's great. No one watches these things anymore.
Well, come on. I mean, it's probably true. We have like 2 viewers. It's okay. Okay, so we're going to talk about a topic that came up in Care Group. Not came up in Care Group, but what we've been covering in Care Group. What I'd like you to do is give us a rundown on the book of Micah.
Yikes. That's long.
Yeah, 7 chapters. But you can do it. Just give us a
7 chapters in 7 minutes.
5-minute overview of the book of Micah. Come on, you can do this. I have confidence in you.
Okay, so I have studied Micah. Look at my notes.
Oh, yeah,
right
lots
there.
of notes. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
right
Color.
there.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there you go. No, it's right. It's backwards.
It is backwards. I saw that. So the book of Micah is amazing. Truly. It's funny. I've read it. I taught it in seminary, kind of in a survey, but I never, spent a few weeks.
And laboring over it.
When I finished the commentary for I went on maternity leave. I felt like it's a lot of work, a lot of work.
Yeah. Totally.
But it was great. If you start looking at the book of Micah, immediately you get to see in verse 1 of chapter 1 that he introduces himself, and then immediately what he's going to do is he's gonna talk about judgment.
Yeah.
And he does this because the book of Micah has like 3 movements.
Mm-hmm.
And every one of those movements starts with the word "hear." Like chapter 1, verse 2, "Hear, O people." Chapter 3, verse 1, "Hear now."
Yep.
And then chapter 6, verse 1,
Yep.
that says, "Hear now" again. So every time he starts with that, he is going to talk about judgment. But then after every time he talks about judgment, he ends in a happy note. The judgment is terrible that he's going to talk about. But then every time he ends with hope, he ends with grace, he ends with God being a great God. And it's incredible because even in chapter 1, he is calling everyone to come and to witness what God is going to do. God is going to judge Israel, and not just the northern kingdom, but also the southern kingdom. God is going to judge them. And then he gives them the reason for judgment. Why? Why would he do this? Because Israel has rebelled.
Yeah.
In verses chapter 1, verse 5 and 6. So what is he going to do? He is going to turn Samaria into a heap of ruins. And even you and I were just talking about it, which is really interesting because when Micah starts prophesying, he starts prophesying a couple of years before the northern kingdom is basically leveled and taken into captivity by the Assyrians.
Yeah.
And God is going to use it, and he actually uses some vivid language but he is going to turn the northern kingdom into a field where you can plant things. Just imagine the devastation. I mean, not just rocks, nothing, not even rocks are going to be left there. So what does he do? In verse 7, he starts lamenting. He says, he's going to, and these are not, quiet tears. These are really, he starts lamenting. Why? Because this is irreversible. What's going to happen is God is going to exact his justice, and he's going to exact justice. And then you see all these different cities. Why? Because God is a just God. Chapter 2 starts with doom again. Why? Because their leaders are very powerful and are taking advantage of the people. These people are not only just bad and corrupt, but they're actually taking advantage of the poor, the immigrant. They're taking advantage of the widow, the orphan. And then he uses an illustration of someone stealing a vineyard, which for a Jewish person immediately would elicit thinking about Naboth vineyard in First King 21. How Ahab wanted that vineyard, and he just takes it. He doesn't care. And that's what they were doing. And then again he goes and he talks about how God is going to judge these people, but not just the powerful leaders. He's going to judge the false prophets. Why? because they prophesy to make money.
Yeah.
If you give them money, they will prophesy good things to you. Kind of like a fortune teller, right?
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
give enough money, they'll say you are going to be rich and famous,
Yeah, totally.
and maybe a king.
Yeah.
And that's basically what they're doing. And what they're doing is they're taking advantage of the defenseless. And this is why God tells them He's going to send them into exile.
Yeah. And this is Northern Kingdom.
The Northern Kingdom, yeah. Which is incredible to think about this, because the prophets, those who were Israel's lawyers, who should have been calling them back to covenant faithfulness, actually, Micah says in chapter 2, they were just giving feel-good messages. They were just saying they were the prosperity preachers of the day.
Totally. And all of this is rooted in money.
Of course.
Like the rulers, the prophets, the priests, they're just all about money. They're about materialism, greed,
what
wealth.
you talked about a couple of weeks ago at church, right? The gold, the glory, and the girls. Basically, that's what they're talking about here. But then in verse 12 of chapter 2, you see that there's a ray of hope. Right? Grace and hope are being shown because God is going to assemble Israel and assemble Jacob. And he says he's going to bring them together. He presents himself as a shepherd of Israel, which is really interesting because Israel didn't have shepherds. These shepherds are taking advantage of the sheep. They're bleeding them dry, basically. And this is actually the true shepherd who's going to bring them together. And he's actually going to, and he's talking about a future event that hasn't happened yet. But eventually he's going to bring them back. And they're going to enjoy this time. However, in chapter 3, again, you have another problem here, right? There's a second judgment. And this judgment is on leaders. He seems to talk about these leaders, and he describes them as cannibals, basically. He says that these people are tearing off the skin and the flesh from their bones. I mean, this is a vivid language to say these people are basically bleeding you dry. They're exploiting the poor, and the prophets they're not better. Why? Because they're leading the people astray. They're getting paid to give good reports. The materialism, it's incredible. And instead of bringing light, they bring darkness to them. And then in verse 8 in chapter 3, he says, but me, on the other hand, that's a strong adversative there in the Hebrew. He says, I'm not like those guys. I'm filled with power. I'm filled with justice. These people are full of injustice. And I'm full of courage. I'm actually going to say what this false prophets are not going to say. And what is he going to say? There's a judgment upon Zion and upon Jerusalem. Now we're talking about the southern kingdom. Now the northern kingdom is gone. Now the southern kingdom is going to be suffering. Why? Because the rulers, their prophets, their priests, instead of teaching what they're supposed to be teaching, they're bleeding their people dry. They're perverting the justice for money. And even one of the parts that is really sad, in verse 11 of chapter 3, it says, her leaders pronounce judgment for a bribe, her priests instruct for a prize, her prophets divine for money, yet they lean on the Lord, saying, is it not the Lord in our midst? Calamity will not come upon us. Those are false claims. They're saying, hey, do you remember the Exodus? We're fine. We're golden. Let's keep this going. Come on. But what's going to happen? Verse 12 says that destruction is going to come, and there's a huge contrast there. There's not going to be. It says here that the Zion will be plowed as a field. Again, that idea of the mountain of the Lord. Now it's like a field. There's not going to be anything left over there. But in chapter 4, you see hope again. You see that the last days, we're not living in those days, yes, but in the future, Israel is going to come back. And the mountain of the Lord is not going to be now the mountain of the Lord. It's going to be the highest peak on earth. Why? Because God is going to meet with his people there. That's going to be God's temple where he's going to be worshipped. And all these nations are going to have a pilgrimage. They're going to come to hear the word of God. They're going to come to learn, which is really interesting. And God is going to be ruling. I mean, which is so exciting to hear about that. There's going to be peace. This is here that their hammers are going to, and their sword, they're going to turn their swords into plowshares, and they're going to turn their spears into pruning hooks. And no one's going to hear about war.
Yeah.
And then he says something which is really interesting. He says that people are going to sit under fig trees and they're going to talk, and they're going to just spend time without ever hearing about war.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be such a period of peace. God's only going to bring that peace. And God is going to assemble the weak, the lame, the outcast. Here, God's people are portrayed as the weak. And God is going to restore that kingdom. Zion is going to flourish again. And God's going to do an amazing work. Even though they're going to be exiled, God's going to rescue them. Even though they're going to be sieged, God is going to rescue them. Why? Because it says in verse 12, God's sovereign plan is going to work out. Which is something incredibly, because because you're going to see later on how a hopeless Zion is going to become an invincible lion. You know, that hopeless Zion who is basically a plowed field is going to be that lion who's going to just be on the prowl. And in verse 13 says it's going to destroy everything. It's going to pulverize everything around them. And then in chapter 5, you see who's going to do that, right? There's going to be a king. And he says there's going to be a king from Bethlehem, just a tiny town, a podunk town, we can say. There's going to be this ruler who's going to come from an insignificant town, and this person is going to be from the days of eternity, from long ago. And that phrase there, it's not talking about the pre-existence of Christ. I think that phrase there is talking about the fact that he's tying Christ, or that ruler, who we know it's going to be Christ, he's tying him to David. He is the son of David. You know, 2 Samuel 7. He's going to be the one that, you know, that God made that covenant with David. That ruler is going to appear, and he is going to shepherd his people. He's going to deliver his people. The Messiah is going to triumph. And then I love how over and over again he uses that "are" and "us," kind of including himself on these believing Jews that are going to actually welcome the Messiah. Oh yeah, they're going to experience that reality. Again, they're going to receive grace. Israel is going to be dominant again. And all her foes are going to be destroyed. And then eventually at the end of chapter 5, you see how even God is going to purify his kingdom. He's going to rid the kingdom of all the terrible things that have happened. He's going to for example, one of the things he talks about fortune tellers, sorceries. He talks about idolatry. God is going to purify them because he's going to want them just for himself. Which is a great ending to a chapter 5, when you start with a king, the king that has been Israel has been waiting for a long time, who's going to come, is going to set up peace. Israel's going to be dominant like it's never been before. Everybody's going to come and pilgrim, and there's going to be a pilgrimage just to hear the word of God. And eventually God is going to purify the land like it's never been pure. Because it's never been pure before.
That's awesome. It's really cool because you do have that flow where it's like Israel, Northern Kingdom, bad shepherds, but a good shepherd will come. In Southern Kingdom, bad rulers, but a good ruler will come. And then who's this good ruler? Well, in chapter 5, it's the one who's born in Bethlehem, the one who is the son of David, who will come and be a good shepherd, who will be a good ruler, and then who will purify his people.
Which is super interesting because even before we were talking, and we're not doing the podcast at the time, but it's really interesting to see how Micah is able to arrange all of these things in such a way that you can see these as you're reading it. You're seeing how the only one faithful is that ruler. No one in Israel is faithful at the time, even then or now, or ever without that ruler. Chapter 6, it starts another lawsuit, right? Here now, there's a covenant lawsuit. They're saying, hey, there's a court case here. The leaders, again, the same idea. The leaders are corrupt. You know, these people are terrible. Look what they're doing. And what they're saying, what he's saying, and I love this in chapter 6, he's reminding them of Israel's history. He talks about how God has ransomed them. He talks about how he helped them to cross the Jordan all those years ago. And even he reminds them of what God has required of them.
Yeah.
He doesn't require miracles.
Yeah.
He requires them to be just. He requires them to, in a passage that we know really well, to actually do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God, which is incredible because God will judge sin. God is going to judge the injustice of Israel. God is going to punish Israel, even because Israel is trying to follow the old kings. Those kings that were the worst kings at the end of chapter 6, you see that. The worst kings of the north, those are the ones that Israel loves because those kings were the ones that brought a certain type of security, but they were wicked, they were idolaters.
Totally.
And it's really interesting. At the end of beginning of chapter 7, you see a lament. He's lamenting the fact that he feels alone. That no one is godly, that basically everyone around him seems to be skillful at doing sin
and evil.
And he even says that concerning evil, both hands do it well. They're ambidextrous at doing evil. The prince asks, also the just ask for bribes. I mean, you think things couldn't get worse, but God is going to judge them at the end of verse 4. God is going to judge them, and even family relations are going to be bad because God is going to judge them. At the end, he ends with confidence in verses 7 to the end, right? There's the last part of grace and hope, right? He sees himself as a representative of the people, a representative of the nation. So he starts talking in first person, but as part of the nation. And he talks about how God is going to vindicate him, that God is going to rebuild that kingdom again, that God is going to judge the sinful deeds of the people around him, that God is going to rule over them. There's amazing, like, he ends with these rhetorical questions saying, who is God? This is who God is. Who is like God? Think about this. And it's really interesting because he ends with the faithfulness of God. And it's what it is even more amazing is that the name Micah means who is like God.
Who is like God?
And he ends asking that question. He begins, judging them because God is not like them, calling God to judge, and now he ends with the faithfulness of God. And he's appealing back. He's going back to that covenant that God made with Abraham all those years ago. He's saying all of this is going to happen because of that covenant back then. So God is not going to leave you, Israel. God is going to bring you back. There's going to be a great time, a golden, age for Israel. And all of that is not because you guys are going to be better. It's not because you guys are going to, pull yourself together. But because God is faithful to what he said to Abraham in Genesis 12, 1-3, right? I will bless those who bless you, and those who do not bless you, I will curse.
I will curse, Wow, that's incredible. So it's really interesting actually when you come to the end there, because you have that idea that, like, you have the faithlessness of the rulers in Israel, faithlessness of the rulers in the southern kingdom, and then faithlessness even among the people. But ultimately, at every point, God is still faithful as a shepherd. God is faithful as a king, and then ultimately God will be faithful to them because of the Abrahamic covenant and the blessings that he promised them. So God's faithfulness is really like the main sort of, like, who else is like this? No one's like this. Israel's not like this. Northern kingdom's not like this. Southern kingdom's not like this. The people aren't like this. Even Micah himself isn't really like this. It's only God who's faithful in that way.
Which is really interesting because as I was reading this and preparing this, that's the punchline. He doesn't mention that before. But in the end, it's basically God is faithful to that promise he made so many years ago to Abraham. And he's going to make it happen. All these things are going to happen because God is faithful.
God's faithful. That's awesome. Well, super encouraging, man. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's
Thanks
great.
for walking us through that. I hope that's helpful for you. If you have any questions about the book of Micah or really any biblical text, we'd love to answer them for you. You can just email us at info@faithbibleoc.org. Thanks, Gus.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.